I'm Paul Edwards, author of the Mourner's Woods books, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Today I'm reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue 83 from 1971. I thought some of you might enjoy looking through this vintage monster magazine with me, just in case you don't own your own copy of Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue 83 from 1971. And together we can see what kind of vintage monster goodness is in here. All right, right here on the cover, I have a quiz question for you. Let's see how well you know your vintage horror movies. As a kid, I thought that this magazine cover was just a generic painting of a scene from a mummy movie. But now, as an adult, having seen these a million times, I recognize that it is a specific set of characters from the 1940s mummy movies. Do you know who it is? Obviously, Kharis. I mean, these two. This is George Zucco as the old high priest from The Mummy's Hand and The Mummy's Tomb. And this is Turin Bey, the young new high priest in The Mummy's Tomb. And of course, it does tell you that there's an article featuring The Mummy's Tomb here, so that is an extra hint. But clearly that's Turin Bey. And then by inference, you can tell that that's George Zucco in his old high priest makeup. Okay, so 60-cent cover price. So you know we're in the 70s, and we are off. Right away, we get a mystery photo. Do you know what famous horror actor that is? You probably do. That is Boris Karloff. Imagine him coming down your chimney. Yikes. And you can tell it's a Forrest J. Ackerman piece when there's one of these terrible puns. So let's see what we get here in this issue. Oh. We get this month's crop of kids that wrote in to try to get their picture published in the magazine. And not so young kids. Wow. Christopher Lee, that's really good. Okay. All right. So, April 1971. Mind you, if it's the April edition, I don't know why the Santa picture's here, but okay. Let's see what we get in this issue. The Fang Mail. The Mummy's Tomb is going to be our feature article. When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. So this is going to be a good mix because you get like a gothic horror and a more far out horror with the dinosaurs. You get the mystery photo, the Graveyard Examiner, the Hunchbacks of Notre Dame. Look close, Hunchbacks, because it's going to go through several of them. All right, looks to me like we're ready to start. Let's go. Oh, and this is an indication giving credit for the cover art. This is one of Basil Gogos's covers. Basil Gogos was an artist who was really too good for us. He was so good at doing monster paintings, and he did almost 50 Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine covers. It's Tanna leaf time again. That's the leaves they would brew to keep the mummy alive. We pick up the story from part 1 of last issue's Famous Monsters. So they're continuing. If you have both issues, you can read the whole plot synopsis for the movie. There's Turin Bey, and of course, Lon Chaney Jr. as Kharis the Mummy. And the caption is, "Good night, Kharis. If you want anything, just ring for tomb service." Oh my gosh, that's a Forrest J. Ackerman pun if I ever read one. even old mummies sometimes go out with old flames. So the climax to this film, The Mummy's Tomb, ended with a fire at the Banning house, and the mummy was allegedly incinerated. At least it seemed that way as this movie drew to a close. Of course he came back. They always come back. But if you have seen this movie a few times, you'll start to notice in the battle scene, they really are not as anywhere near as careful with the open flame as you would expect them to be. It really was kind of dangerous as a shoot, I think. Now, the first time I saw this, I felt so bad that Babe Hansen from the last movie came back and only to get killed in this film. You know, it's an unofficial rule of thumb that the Universal Mummy movies, the 40s ones, were set 30 years apart. So if The Mummy's Hand, which was the first of this series of mummy movies, if The Mummy's Hand took place in 1940, then this film, The Mummy's Tomb, took place in 1970 when Banning and Babe were old men. And then that would mean that The Mummy's Curse took place in the year 2000, which would mean that The Mummy's Ghost would have taken place in 2000, which would mean that the final one, The Mummy's Curse, takes place in the year 2030. So if you follow the fan unofficial rule that these are each set 30 years apart, then the fourth one hasn't even happened yet. This is a great picture. Oh, there's the big showdown as the Banning house goes up in flames. Mummy, my tummy hurts, really. Some of these Forey Ackerman puns, you know, you can tell that the target audience was like 8-year-olds. Just like any living mummy, Kharis goes for a little walk with his girl. Okay, so the jokes are dumb, but in 1971, a lot of kids would have scissored this picture out, because this is a nice big picture, and it is a good shot of the mummy outside the graveyard where the high priest had him hidden. And you could cut that out and put it on your notebook, which I'm sure is what happened to many an issue of Famous Monsters of Filmland. When dinosaurs ruled the earth. Nice. Oh. You know, right before this film, there was a color remake of the movie 1 Million BC, and this time it was called 1 Million Years BC. And when somebody pointed out to the people that were making that film, you know, cavemen and dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time, his answer was, these movies are not made for professors. I just love that. I love that line. Nice. To be frank. Of course, this is Christopher Lee in his one and only appearance as the Frankenstein monster in the first of the Hammer Studios Frankenstein movies, The Curse of Frankenstein, in 1958. So this movie was about 13 years old when this magazine came out. But of course, Christopher Lee already had earned his place among the classics of horror actors. And I do like the look of this Hammer Frankenstein monster. They were different in every Hammer film, unlike Universal, where they tried to make them look the same from film to film. But in the Hammer films, they were not the same monster. New monsters kept being created. It's a good publicity shot. I like that. All right. You get this issue's mystery photo. Do you know what movie or TV show this is from? And then here's the answer to last month's mystery photo. Oh, here's something I actually don't see too often in a Famous Monsters of Filmland. One of these word search puzzles. This is not a typical feature in Famous Monsters. I'm not gonna make you sit there and watch a video of me doing the word search, but I might make a photocopy of this and try to finish the word search myself, see if I can get them all. Don't worry, I won't write in the magazine. I know better than that. Here's some monster kids who wrote in and got their pictures published in the magazine. You asked for it. These are requests. You know, right now, if you wanted to see a picture of the Metaluna mutant from This Island Earth, you could just do a Google search and conjure it up. You couldn't do that, obviously, in the 70s. So you would write in to a magazine and say, hey, please print a picture of, and here's the Metaluna mutant. Here is Mr. Hyde from the often overlooked 1931 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie starring Frederick March. People remember the 1920 John Barrymore Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And even more people remember the 1941 Spencer Tracy Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But very few people remember this Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it really is a shame because it's so good. I like them all, but I'm partial to the Frederick March. Wow. Okay, even if you've never seen the specific episode, just looking at this monster, you know it's from the Outer Limits TV show. Their monsters just all had a certain aesthetic to them. There's Peter Lorre all jacked up. Oh. Creepy as can be. So Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, each of whom was a king of horror films, co-starred a bunch of times together. I think it might have been 8 times that they co-starred in movies together. And they would not always be, like one of them would be the bad guy in one film and the other one would be the bad guy in the next film. In this particular film, this was from The Raven, the 1934 version of The Raven. Bela Lugosi was the main bad guy, and he forced Boris Karloff's character to become his servant in conducting his crimes. Oh. Michael Landon as a teenager in I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Same Michael Landon who later starred in the TV show Highway to Heaven. You can order some back issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. Let me test you again, monster kids. Do you know what movie this is from, this picture? It's Bela Lugosi playing Dracula and Glenn Strange playing the Frankenstein monster. Do you know what movie that is? That is from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948. All right, The Hunchbacks of Notre Dame. Lon Chaney, of course, in the definitive silent Hunchback of Notre Dame. That film, which is in the public domain, you can see that on my YouTube channel. I have a podcast of silent horror films, and you can see The Hunchback of Notre Dame starring Lon Chaney in that. He's excellent in it. Charles Laughton in the 1930s. Anthony Quinn. James Cagney. The classic Quasimodo, Lon Chaney Sr., in the role he created in 1923. You know, Famous Monsters always paid a lot of attention to Lon Chaney Sr., and rightly so, because he was, you know, the archetype of all great horror movie actors who came after him, like Boris Karloff and Vincent Price. So it's absolutely appropriate that they paid a lot of attention to Lon Chaney Sr. But as a practical matter, it probably didn't hurt that these films were already in the public domain in 1971 when this came out. So they would not have had to pay anything to publish these images. Quasimodo rings the bell. Wow. Yeah, this is the Charles Laughton one. You know, it's interesting because the 1923 Hunchback of Notre Dame, the actual life-sized set for the front of the cathedral stayed there untouched on the studio lot for years until it was time to remake the movie, and they used the same exterior of the Notre Dame Cathedral that was used in the silent version. I'm nowhere near as familiar with the Anthony Quinn version. I should rewatch that. Oh, sure. End of part 1 of Hunchbacks of Notre Dame, to be concluded in the next issue. Yeah. Girls and Ghouls Gallery. You know, I saw on the internet, at one point, there was a website, I don't know if it still exists, but it was just monsters carrying girls. That's like a very specific niche. Just pictures of monsters carrying girls. And there were a lot of them. Nice. We get a big spread on The Raven. I think the best of the Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff co-starring movies. So what happens is Karloff's, as far as they're concerned, what happens is that Karloff's character is a criminal who comes to this evil doctor, played by Bela Lugosi, to get an illegal underground operation to have plastic surgery and change his face, you know, so the police won't recognize him because he's a wanted man. So seizing the opportunity, the evil doctor does perform plastic surgery on Karloff and hideously contorts his face to make him look like a monster and says, now you'll obey me and do whatever I say, otherwise I'll never put your face back to normal again. So Karloff has little choice but to reluctantly obey Bela Lugosi. Although we would just as soon kill him, he knows that he'll never get his natural face back or any other face if he doesn't do what Lugosi says. And of course, the Edgar Allan Poe poem, The Raven, is only loosely an inspiration for this movie. Basically, Lugosi is obsessed with the young woman, and he's also a crazed Poe fan, so he doesn't take her rejections well and subjects her and her loved ones to a plethora of crazy tortures in his zany house. Yeah. This is when Karloff's character was about to go under for the operation. Don't do it! Yeah, but we know he will. You know, even though Karloff's character himself was no saint in this movie, you couldn't help but feel bad for him. You couldn't help but feel bad for him. This is when he woke up from his operation and saw that his face was mangled now. And then crazy Bela Lugosi has all these curtains part, and there's mirrors all around him to show him how terrible his face is, while Lugosi is up here in like a viewing window laughing maniacally at him. It's pretty creepy. 5 Karloffs for the price of 1 in the room of monster mirrors. Well, let me tell you something. You may look monstrous, but this was the real monster. Lugosi was the real monster. He made you do all the bad things. So I still feel bad for you, Boris, in this movie. Lugosi was the villain here. The villain named Volin. That's right, I'd forgotten to mention. His name is Dr. Volin in this. And of course, I'll try to get this all in a good shot. Here he is torturing the judge, who is the father of the young lady he's obsessed with the pendulum blade coming down toward him. I'm not sure how these guys, these obsessed guys, ever think that this is going to get them the girl. Do they ever think, oh, well, you know, she said no before, but now that I've threatened her father with death, now she'll see that I'm really a good guy and she should date me. The logic only makes sense in their minds. And now we get to everyone's favorite part of Famous Monsters, the crazy ads. Venus flytrap. Let you draw any person in 1 minute. That's a tracing apparatus. Here's some good vintage monster creators and actors. Oliver Reed. He was in a few Hammer horror films. Actually, mostly Hammer thriller films. But he did play the werewolf in Curse of the Werewolf. John Carradine played Dracula a number of times and was in some other horror movies as well. Ray Harryhausen, not a horror actor, but he's the creator of many stop-motion wonders in horror, sci-fi, and fantasy movies. Michael Rennie, of course, from The Day the Earth Stood Still. And Lon Chaney Jr. Too many credits to count for him. I suppose his signature role is the Wolfman, but he was in a lot. Nice. Captain Company was responsible for a whole lot of the products advertised in this and similar publications. Life-size Frankenstein pinup. I like the idea of a 6-foot Frankenstein monster pinup, but I'm not sure that this drawing is exactly what I would want. Looks a little too stylized. All right, so these posters, this of course is Boris Karloff playing Fu Manchu, master criminal. I assume you know King Kong, Hulk, and Spider-Man. Mr. Spock, does he really count as a monster? I don't think so, but, you know, fantasy related. Werewolf, it's actually the Wolfman himself, Lon Chaney Jr. A good one of Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula. Brigitte Bardot Well, she definitely is the prettiest among the entries here, but that's not much competition. And Steve McQueen, who of course starred in The Blob. Okay, now you have to look close at this and see how kids might have been fooled. So this is 1971. So every little boy and girl knew the Batman TV show, which had been on from 1966 to 1968. And you would think, looking at this ad, that they were selling you something, especially when they put this, the Bam, Pow, Zowie, Biff. And the way they drew Batman here to look the way he looked in the 60s, you would think, from all the visuals here, that they were selling you home movies of the Batman TV show starring Adam West. But they're not. You got to read it carefully. This is 6 spine-tingling episodes of the original great Columbia Pictures movie serial from back in the 40s. That's what you're getting. Pardon me. Not that that's bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I've seen the serials, but it's not what it looks like. It's not the 60s TV show. So you really got to read these things carefully. Barnabas Collins, of course, from the horror soap opera Dark Shadows. I was never much of a sword and sorcery adventure fan, but if you are, Conan the Barbarian is where it's at. You know, the first comic books were actually just printed compilations of newspaper comic strips that had already been published previously. And so what this is a big compendium they're selling you of Flash Gordon comic strips from back when Flash Gordon was in his glory days in the 40s. Check these out. Look at the detail on some of these. You know, it doesn't, all it says here is the Mad Doctor, but I've always thought this is clearly Dr. Neiman from House of Frankenstein. Just, you know, not credited. 8mm monster movies. But what you get when you send away is not the whole film. It's one reel of film. It's like highlights from the movie, about 8 to 10 minutes of highlights from the movie. At the time this was printed, The Vampire Bat was a mostly forgotten movie. It's much more accessible now. But history had basically left this movie behind, and only die-hard horror fans had seen it by 1971 when this magazine came out. Now, because it's in the public domain, it's on a million DVD collections. And as a matter of fact, on my channel, I have a podcast, All Night Spook Show, where it is one of the first movies on. So you can see The Vampire Bat now much more easily than you could have back when this magazine came out. It took me years to finally find out what this picture was, because this picture kept surfacing. This is the stage actor who played Renfield in the play of Dracula. It's not from a movie. It took me a long time to finally pin down the information on that. Oh, I had this. Well, I still do. I still have the CD of it. Yeah, you can tell that you were a monster kid when you would be listening to one of these Halloween sound effects records anytime that it wasn't October. Because ordinary non-fans might listen to them in October, but only us twisted monster kids would listen to them when it wasn't October. Why? Why? What's wrong with us? Now, the question is, what's wrong with them? Everybody else should be listening to them. Who else wants a live monkey? Yeah. Human skeleton? Yeah. Try explaining that purchase to your parents. Do you remember Eerie magazine and its sister publication, Creepy? Or were you more a fan of Vampirella? Me personally, I was always more a fan of Famous Monsters itself, though. You get more variety. And you would get the Japanese monsters in this a lot of the time, too. The Creepy Magazine fan club. Oh, we're done. One last thing on the back cover. It's a panel advertising Monster World, which was a companion publication to Famous Monsters. I have some of these, not all of them though. I've always loved the Frankenstein and the Santa. That's a really good cover though. Listen, if you enjoy classic monsters and vintage horror, you would love my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. They're for sale on Amazon.com. Basically, I've written stories, a series of stories that are all set in a haunted forest, Mourner's Woods. It's a completely new cast of characters in every book, and each set of characters has to face a new horror out in this dangerous, forbidden wilderness, Mourner's Woods. There's different monsters in each book, ghosts, all kinds of fiends from beyond, but always in my franchise, the most dangerous threat the characters have to face is each other, because they are very prone to betraying each other. So Mourner's Woods, if you enjoy vintage horror and classic monsters, you should absolutely check out my Mourner's Woods books on Amazon. My name again is Paul Edwards. Thanks for spending some time with me going through Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue number 83, with this awesome Basil Gogos cover art. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.